Thank you so much, Professor Sanjay and Professor Murray, for joining us on a podcast at Dawdle. A very special session, guys, where we have two stalwarts, especially from the education industry and startup world, joining us to share their insights. I welcome you both. We have quite an interesting set of topics to discuss with the veterans. But before we go there, I know both of you don't need an introduction, but if a bit of context is given on your journey so far, would be great for our audience. Sanjay, over to you.
Okay, thanks very much. So I am a military brat, but apart from that, I'm a chartered accountant from the UK and nearly 23 years overseas, and then came back to India. So far, have engaged with 209 different type of startup models. 29 we killed on the table. Took one to all the way to IPO and exit and reverse mergers and all that fun stuff. So I had a lot of fun doing that. Took on corporate training at MNCs, then went into teaching. So I've been teaching chartered accountants who want to become ACCAs. And apart from that, these days I teach at MYRA School of Business, MBAs. The subject is Fundamentals of Entrepreneurship and Small Business Management, along with family business. And I'm also the executive director for Pratyagra Foundation, which you see emblazoned on my chest. That is seeking to grow the startup ecosystem of Mysuru, Karnataka, ultimately India, and globally. And the reason why, Murray and I are working together because he has also a global mindset for us to actually move together. So that's my very brief introduction.
Thank you so much, Professor Sanjay. Professor Murray, over to you.
Yes, I've spent quite a few years in the university teaching, and quite a few of those courses I've taught have been in the entrepreneurial area. And so I've always thought the standard model, business plan to get an investor and so on, is very, very appropriate for many, but not all. And so as time went on, I began to think a little bit more about the idea of the skills that one needs to be able to be an executive or to be a founder, especially. And I've concluded that a lot of the education that we get in our universities, which is very, very, very good, is not very targeted to the needs of the founders themselves. And so, Sanjay, we've been looking at the idea of the skill sets that actually allow a founder to scale an organization. And one of the things that we've concluded is that people ultimately need to work on certain types of expertise and skills to be able to make that transition. And so these aren't necessarily managerial, by the way. These are other types of skills. And so I focused a lot on those. An example would be certain types of leadership, certain types of knowledge bases, like how to build a skill, which a lot of people don't understand. Focused a lot on digital entrepreneurship, digital marketing. And ultimately, we're looking at potentially the idea that all great founders need to have an aspirational goal to be a great founder, not an average one, but a great founder. And I think that ultimately is what we all are striving to do. So I have an academy, an online academy, which has a fair amount of courses, and I do coaching as well.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking us through your journey so far. We have a very interesting, topic that we want to discuss. And the first amongst them is that, we see when we talk across India and the US, we are witnessing a shift from education for credentials to education for capability. So how do you see this transition unfolding in your respective ecosystem? And what is driving it, whether it's policy, technology, or learner expectations? I think Sanjay can give us the Indian
first.
Okay, sure. So the foundational gap in India's education and training is well known. It's well discussed. There are many reports which keep coming out. There's a mismatch between what goes on in the education system and the job market. Specifically, you find that whilst people go through a lot of theoretical learning and education, what they don't focus on are things like soft skills, the ability to survive in a workplace, office politics, for example, how to deal with people and still remain in a professional mode, even though you have to discipline them, and so on and so forth. The outdated curriculum is not helping either. Although I would say that in India, of course, adoption of Gen AI is one of the highest in the world, and we are starting to see more of it. Since I'm teaching entrepreneurship, I'm doing it using the methodology of Gen AI now, and I I'm doing that, but we are a minority. When you look at what are the top 15 skills required at the workplace between now and 2030, the main skills are not technical. They are things like communication and so on and so forth. And what the education system has not realized, unfortunately, is that you can at max teach a skill, but then the person has to practice a lot to develop expertise. Ultimately, by even more practice and application, you develop an ability. And what the job market pays you for is your ability, and the credentials only help, in the sense that they get you into the door and not, anything beyond that. And there's low job readiness despite all the training. Only half of the youth are employable as per the economic survey of 2024. Only 51% people had the requisite skills, not enough apprenticeships. I'll tell you this personal. My daughter just graduated undergrad. She's now got an apprenticeship with an aerospace company. It was very hard to get. It is only because people knew me, etc. I was able to get that done. But you have that. Now, we have fragmented efforts across the ecosystem. Government, industry, academia often are working in silos. Industries permanently shouting, where are the people? We have to train them and they come into us, etc., etc. And then there's a huge urban-rural gap. But let's not only focus on the problems. What's needed, of course, solutions would be better collaboration. That's an obvious one. More hands-on learning. Because especially now with millennials and Gen Z, they get bored very, very quickly. They can Google almost anything you are going to tell them. It has to be hands-on. And then digital inclusion in India specifically is a huge issue, as we all know. So that has to be solved. And to solve that, you first have to put electricity everywhere and then send internet everywhere so that everyone can benefit. Over to you, Murray, please.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Sanjay, that also in America, we're seeing a lot of disconnect between what people learn in the degree and the needs of the employer. Now, there are some degrees where the match is fairly good. I mean, in the health professions, we see a fairly good match. We see a fairly good match in STEM, but in a lot of other degrees, graduates are coming out into the workforce missing really vital skills. Some of these are actually human relation skills, as was mentioned, but also on the technical side. I'm going to use one example of where I spent a lot of time, which is in digital marketing. And unfortunately today, at least from the American schools, I really can't hire most marketing degree majors. And the reason I cannot hire them is not that they don't have the theory, because again, it's very good from that standpoint, but they don't have the practical application of the theory in the real world. Now, some do. Some are self-taught, and those are the gems, the people that teach themselves how to do something. And so, oh my gosh, I need to learn an email program. Okay, I'm on it. Oh, I need to learn a database. I'm on it. So on and so forth. I need to know how to put up a website. I'm on it. There's people that are like that, and those are, of course, the great jewels. But a lot of people don't think about the technical side, at least in marketing, where there's a lot of technical tools one has to know to do it really well. And unfortunately, most of the universities don't teach those. And so I would hesitate to hire a graduate myself as a professor from a university with a degree without looking at their technical skills. And as was mentioned, their human relation skills are very, very important as well, leadership and so on. So the degree, at least as near as we can figure, becoming so they use the term market signal, and it's a signal of excellence. Is becoming less valuable compared to looking at discrete skills, and some of those skills are available or authenticated through certificates and things like that, so on and so forth. So AI being one that's really, really hot now as well, we all know.
The question here is that this has been talked about for the last decades, 2-3 decades. Like, I was born in 1990. I think from 1990 only, from the time that I've kind of started understanding education, this thing has been talked about. Massive investment has been made inside the education systems, but still it fails to make learners job ready or entrepreneurially capable. So what are those structural or mindset changes that are needed to ensure academia and industry truly co-create talent pipelines?
Okay, so I'll handle the first one, which is, so in India, the industry academia partnerships are growing, but
Yeah.
they're still facing gaps in scale, coordination, and impact. Now, what's working well? I'll give a couple of real life examples. So you have institutions like Galgotia University, L&T EduTech, who have been integrating hands-on training, real-world projects, etc., etc. Our own institution, MYRA School of Business, is by design industry academia. Almost all the profs, only 9 profs are tenured and permanent. The rest are all industry, from the industry, like myself and many others. And they come from, very good institutions from Harvard and Stern, etc., IIMs, so on and so forth. So by design, it's been done like that. So other than that, you have the government-led initiatives. You have Assam's Directorate of Technical Education, very much at the forefront. It signed many MOUs to offer internships, etc. And then we have national platform, the CII Global Summit, PSA strategic alliances, joint R&D, and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of focus on job readiness. Challenges, of course, it's not all good news, fragmented efforts. So again, there's a difference between the rural and urban landscape. Many partnerships are simply isolated and lack national coordination or shared frameworks. Ministry of Education is trying to do stuff through IIC in a proper way to kind of harmonize this whole thing. But there's limited reach because tier 2 and 3 colleges or rural situations are not being able to be benefited. And there's slow curriculum reform. To reform a curriculum in India is a big, big deal, right? And then there's a low faculty and industry interaction. And this has been noted, which is why some of the newer institutions have deliberately gone for. So if you're teaching entrepreneurship, what better to have than a founder themselves teach the entrepreneurship journey? Or in the academia side, have people who are from industry having worked with large organizations, right? So what's needed, I think, is modular and scalable models and outcome-driven partnership between industry and academia. So you're measuring the end result rather than, you put up a large building or whatever, which ultimately doesn't matter, a faculty immersion program. So faculty themselves need to be embedded out into industry on a regular basis. And finally, then the regional innovation hubs and clusters and everything else. I'm part of Mysuru Entrepreneurship Forum. And what we have achieved since last January is all the big players in Mysuru are now council members of the same council. And we've started jointly doing webinars and so on and so forth. Much more will happen in the future. Over to you, Rishi.
Yeah. One of the differences in the societies, I think, is in India, you have a lot more interaction with the government, and the government is promoting a lot of these policies. In America, right now, anyway, there's very little push on the universities themselves to be more adaptable and flexible and more oriented towards jobs. Now, there is movement and so on, but not as much. There's a lot of movement, in terms of support for artificial intelligence, which has become a really, really important factor now in the job market. A lot of employers are looking for people with AI knowledge, and in the universities, at least here, most of them have been very slow in incorporating artificial intelligence into their core curriculums. Now, individual professors have, but, from a systemic standpoint, in terms of the degree, looking at each course and seeing what may be useful from an AI or should be augmented with AI, and that is still to be done by most of the universities, actually. In terms of your question about a mindset, I think this is really, really, really important. We're in a new era. We're in a new age. We're in an era where humans are doing things that we've never done before, and we've never created an intelligence before of the caliber that we're seeing with artificial AIs. And this is causing a lot of disruption as well, we know. I mean, the disruption in business models, we can all talk about that, but I think more importantly, from the standpoint of many of your audience, is the disruption in role. And one of the major roles we've known for a while now is coding, which is going through a really huge transition. But not just coding, manager. The manager role is actually being disrupted by executive use of artificial intelligence. And this is causing a lot of people in managerial roles to wonder whether their skill sets are obsolete or not, and will be in demand in another 3 or 4 or 5 years. So I think that AI is pushing a lot of the use of AI by executives is pushing a lot of change. And that means that we'll all have to adapt our mindset, so to speak, and really be lifelong learners, seriously, instead of just talking about it.
Murray, I love the article you sent me this morning. Murray sent me an article which said CEO should stand for Chief Experimentation Officer,
Yes.
with AI being the tool of experimentation. So thanks for that, Murray.
Yeah, it was an interesting article. It was put out by the Chief Innovation Officer at Microsoft, and he was saying that teams are going to be very different in the future because teams will be integrated with AI themselves, right? In other words, each team will have an AI and human group, right? Probably a small group in charge of a process. And what fascinated me was he's saying, well, when you first look at a process, you're going to find some low-hanging fruit and you get some improvements and so on and so forth. Yay! And maybe efficiency is going to improve a little bit, but you don't stop. It's like this is a first step of improvement, and then you're going to have to do another step of improvement, and then you're going to have to do another step of improvement. And the model is shifting to one of collaboration between the humans and the AI, or the AIs, as the case might be, and viewing them as a almost co-equal, co-partner, collaborator, co-worker kind of thing. And that's what the model they are. So the idea of a team is going to change a lot in the next few years.
Right. And I think, Sanjay sir was talking about the education system of India. It was kind of reminding me that a lot of the educational institutions, if you talk to, their focus is mostly on the admissions part. That's the main KPI which drives their every decision. Even the placements decision is driven by whether it will lead to admissions. Even if a foreign exchange program is being driven by whether it will lead to admissions. Do you think, sir, to Sanjay sir, this mindset needs a change? And also, secondary, as you told that, 50% of the graduates and even postgraduates, they are not employable in India. And I have seen firsthand that, people coming out of MBA colleges, they don't know even how to operate Google Sheets. So, there are so many folks, especially from tier 2, tier 3 cities who have studied in those colleges, but they have done an MBA, right? Means they have a degree. They struggle even with Google Sheets and even kind of communicating even two lines, properly. Your viewpoints on that, sir, especially that KPI of admissions, which is driving, because the population is huge. So the colleges think that, we just have to fill in the seats, get the money, and then, everything will be taken care of.
So let's actually look at the exit point, which is the placements. Last year, I think for the past 2 years, statistics even from the IIMs. So Murray, for your reference, the IIMs are like the Ivy League of
Yes.
India.
Okay.
There were vacancies of almost 35% at one of the IITs, which is a storied IIT, and so on and so forth. So just imagine, previously, every person graduating from that institution would get placed and typically go to the US or other places. Now they're struggling to actually exit from there. So if the exit is not guaranteed, then why would someone join a course, and especially at master's level, where from your parents' perspective, it's buddy, this is your last dance at the last chance saloon. I'm not spending any more money on you.
Yeah.
But you can't get a job, then that means the whole family gets affected. So the issue, actually, the trend is that getting admissions has become much harder. Although you find many, many, many institutions springing up because they feel, well, India's demographic is it's the youngest population that should be seeking higher education. By the way, overseas, higher education is chosen by people who are incredibly serious about it.
Yes.
Whereas in India, it's like you do an undergrad and then almost immediately go into a master's, which is about as dumb as you could be. Very good degrees overseas require minimum 3 to 4 years
Yes.
post undergrad work experience, because you could be sitting with, and this is true, if you still sit in Stanford and taking a class, You'll have someone like Phil Knight sitting next to you, and Phil Knight's Mr. Nike. How are you going to have a conversation with someone like that if you haven't even worked for a single day? So the education system is broken. The focus on admissions is fundamentally a business focus, because if you don't put bums on seats, you don't get money, which pays your investment that you've actually done in. So a lot of challenge is definitely there. So now alternative ways of learning are going on. As Murray also said, continuous learning is not an option. You got to do it. The one language, people in India talk a lot about regional languages permanently. The one language everyone should know now is prompt engineering. If you don't know that language, you don't exist in the job market, right? And so on and so forth. There are many nuances now that workplaces change permanently. You want to get into business, it's probably the toughest career, the choice that you could ever make is to become a startup or an MSME, etc. And whilst people can engage with you and help you and so on and so forth, but it's not going to happen. And I would not recommend anyone. I told my daughter this also. Please don't join any MBA or masters. Work for at least 3 to 4 years. And then if you really want to do something because you need to, then only take up higher education. It's not for everyone. People should focus actually on practical skills, on vocational skills. Some of the vocational skills earn a hell of a lot of money. If you're a plumber in the Western world, you can earn, enough money, AI or no AI. So a plumber is going to have to fix something physically, right? Or a chef or whatever. So India, with its huge population, I think vocational skills, focusing on grassroots innovation and so on and so forth, would be probably the way to do it. Augmenting it with short courses, online courses, and continuous upskilling. In the last week, I've just done 2 Google's AI certifications myself as a continuous commitment to learning.
Professor Murray, is it the same case in the US as well that institutions are focused more on the admissions part than the overall development of the students, which happens inside the campus? Because one thing which I've seen is that I've seen my brother is studying in the US is that they do a lot of internships in between. Is it the case with all the colleges or only the crema de layer, like only the top 100 or 200?
Yeah, it's very interesting, actually, because the universities, at least the premier universities, are very selective and they're very good at choosing good students, and so on. And they've done it historically for quite a few years. But when you look at the end of the pipeline, as Sanjay was mentioning, we're looking at placement, outplacement. We're looking at the ability to get a job. And for some odd reason, the universities don't devote much resources to helping students find employment. And that also includes internships. There are career centers, of course, but the use of business school as an example, you get the degree and they expect you to go find a job yourself. I mean, that's a lot of where it is. So it's individual initiative. And unfortunately, the program doesn't include a lot of techniques to help one understand how one should market oneself for an employer. In other words, I don't use the word job search. I use the word marketing, because I think people we're marketing ourselves to be able to get part-time or full-time work. And a lot of times people, they don't know. They don't know the techniques that they need to do. They don't know how to do resumes. They don't know how to do a large social platform like LinkedIn. There's no coursework in the structure of the university business schools that allow them to learn this. And so they have to figure it all out themselves. And you can imagine how difficult it is. I think we all have gone through that first job syndrome and refusal, or you send out 100 resumes and no one responds. And so I've been through that, and I know we all have. So I would say the universities are not very good at helping people find employment the way they should be. So on and so forth. So that's a great opportunity for them, I think, to be able to reach out to the employers themselves. So very similar.
Both of you have been guiding a lot of startups and have been quite actively engaged in the startup ecosystem. When we talk about entrepreneurship, it's not just about starting a business. It's about initiative, resilience, and value creation. And these 3 words means a lot, because it's not about the business model. It's about the capability to keep on moving, keep on pivoting, keep on, kind of hitting it till you actually get that. So how can we nurture these mindsets early, especially in schools and universities, through curriculum design, mentorship, and incentives? Sanjay sir, if you can.
Sure. So this is a very good question because I was advising the Sri Ram Global School at Whitefield, and the chairman there was talking to me about starting entrepreneurship training from class 7 onwards. Because it was, he is very clear that, look, people graduating from class 12 should either be able to gain entry into an undergrad degree or actually get into their family business or launch their own business. So that one has to nurture fairly young. Entrepreneurship is probably the hardest choice anyone could take on. I think of it like training for the Olympics or getting into the special forces and the army. So that means you've got to have a I'm going to do it or else kind of mindset. To stop me, you've got to kill me.
Yes. Yes.
So
yes.
that aspect, and genuinely, because entrepreneurship people keep talking about that hockey stick, that hockey stick
Yes.
everyone drive. So it looks like, I can already see I'll have 1 million customers and blah, blah, blah. But right at the bottom and all along the flat line that they show, it's not a flat line. Actually, it's chasms.
Yes.
And the chasms are emotional as well because it's a very lonely journey. Everyone thinks you're crazy. Your family thinks you're an idiot, right? Till you actually become a millionaire and then they come to you, hey, can you buy me a fancy car or a house or something? And very few people make it. It's just 5% survival rate. So when you go into it with your eyes open, knowing that 95% chances of failure, it's like getting into special forces or like I was saying, anything else. So you got to really prepare yourself, and you prepare your mind first. And what do you prepare your mind with? When you're talking about the 15 skill sets which are relevant, you have things like critical decision making, critical thinking skills, building a network. Where Murray rightly said, if you don't even know that ever since they launched LinkedIn, you yourself became a global brand and you're not managing your own global brand properly, what chance do you have? Et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there are a million things which are related to all of this. And I feel one of the earliest trainings a person should have is to go to an intern at a place where you get into sales and try to sell a product in which the door is being shut on your face all the time. So firstly, you learn humility. If you're able to actually make a sale, then you're onto something. Because to me, I'm a chartered accountant, so finance I know. But I've realized over the years, if you don't know how to sell, forget entrepreneurship. You really, sell is the important thing. Now that's different from marketing, So I don't know if this helps.
Yes, Professor Murray.
Yeah, as I mentioned to you, I started with the standard model of teaching entrepreneurship because that's what the textbooks were saying. You say you had to do a business plan, you had to go out and find small capital, seed capital, usually through angels. And then eventually you would go to the venture capitalists and do the IPO. And that route is very, very dangerous for the entrepreneur. Very few people make it. And so that standard model, I think, is part of the problem because people don't understand that there's models that they could use to be able to start with very little seed capital. And people have done it on the internet for quite a few years now. I call it digital entrepreneurship. In other words, the art of being able to put together messages that put together a network or a community, such as what you're doing, and then being able to monetize that community doesn't require huge investments of capital. It requires a lot of investment in time, but not a lot of capital, so on and so forth. Most people, aren't in an environment where venture capitalists happen to be 1.5 miles away or 3 kilometers away, and they can just kind of go and meet them face to face. I mean, those venture pools are only in a few cities, right? So on and so forth. So that model doesn't work for a lot of people. And so then I thought, well, what does work? Well, one thing I think, as Sanjay has mentioned, we need to look at other skills. And a future entrepreneur, has to sit there and say, well, what will I learn with my technical degree and what won't I learn to be able to be a successful entrepreneur? And that means they have to look at other things like sales, but also leadership. I mean, because the venture people are quite interesting because they say they invest in the team. But if we think for a moment, who builds the team? A team doesn't exist. It's grown by a leader. And so that means that leadership becomes a really important element in the early development of a startup that's commonly not taught. I mean, the theory's taught, but the skill isn't taught. And there's a difference. There's a really huge difference. I might understand the theory, but I don't have the skill. I might understand the theory of communication, but I don't have the skill at communicating. And we see that quite a lot, actually. People that are quite knowledgeable and expertise, but they don't have the tangible skills. And so, in my view, that's one of the things we've got to sit there and say, well, how good are your listening skills? How persuasive are you?
Yeah.
So forth. Do you know how to receive feedback? What? Feedback? What's feedback? All these little things go into making a founder successful. And so I think in some respects, we have to look at the educational model, as Sanjay's been saying, and sit there and say, well, look, you have a good foundation, but on the foundation, we need to build some other skills to help you succeed in your journey. And it's a difficult journey.
I'd just like to add very quickly on this one, Murray. Thanks for that. And so realizing this in our B school, for example, I spoke with the educational committee and I said, do my subject last because I'm teaching fundamentals. So let them learn business analytics, let them learn marketing and this, that, and the other, and we pull it together in my particular course. Now, my course, I've made sure it's 80% practical. 20% only is concept and theory. I split them up. So we have 49 students. We split them up into 7 teams of 7 each. They have titles like CEO, COO, etc., etc. Those are leadership titles. They are taught on, so what is the job description of each one of those CXOs? And you have to own it and you have to demonstrate it. And I do 2 demo days at the end of my course. And the marks for that are given by the external people who come on as judges. So we had like the president of Thai as one of the judges, another industrialist had come along. He was there. Those marks come in. And the marks that I'm allocating are, firstly, just for turning up for my class. My logic is if you're a street vendor, you don't turn up, you don't get a mark, right? So you don't turn up, you bunk my class, it's going to cost you, right? Second is for collaborating with your team. You have to demonstrate that. Third is, how do you perform in the class? I've said, look, you're wearing a fancy CXO title. Can you communicate like a CXO? So when I ask a question, I expect you to stand up and deliver, right? To me. So, and then the fourth is, of course, we do the testing like we normally do, like the academic stuff. So what has happened is my promise to them at the start of the class is you will emerge from my class knowing how to launch a product or service in a big corporation that you want to join as an employee, or you will be able to launch your business using lean startup method. Now, this maybe could be a model that can be extended to the rest of India, and maybe it'll work overseas as well. I know in places like Babson, it certainly does. There are other wonderful, Minerva is I look up to Minerva because of what they teach and how they teach it. Those are the models, I think, that should be done, but are governments and other people willing to spend the money to actually do that? Because that's the need of the hour, not this legacy system we've all inherited.
Yeah, I'll just add one more element to that. I really believe that to be a great human, you have to study great humans. I really do believe that. I've done that in all my classes on leadership and entrepreneurship. I've had them study someone who has really been successful, because the successful people, they know something the rest of us don't. And a lot of them are very willing to share what they've learned along their journey with the people that are coming up, so to speak. And so I also believe in this. I believe in theory. I do. I think theory is very important, practical theory. But I also think that we need to understand that being a founder, being an entrepreneur is difficult, and that one should study people that are successful at it to see what you can do yourself to be successful as well. I think we neglect that whole aspect of their development because they don't have a role model. They don't have a hero or a heroine, someone that they can look up to and say, wow, I wish I could be like one of the great human beings in our cultures, right? And India has many, many great humans, in business and government and military, and we all do study what made them great, because it's one has to assume that to scale, a great person's in my view. A very simple rule goes like this: to have a great organization, be a great founder. Ta-da! There it is. Okay.
True.
Yeah. So
And many times what I feel is that, sir, they have wrong role models, like and because a lot of the right role models don't openly talk about their stories in public, and that is one of the goals of Dawdle.live, where we are trying to bring in the real people,
yep.
you know kind of speak out their opinions so that they can have the right role models. I remember I went to a college and I asked, who is your role model? And there was a lady who kind of showed me an Instagram influencer, and she
Mhm.
told that this is my role model. And I was quite surprised, because the kind of generation even I come from, our role model was somebody like, say, John Nash, or
Uh-huh.
somebody like Steve Jobs, or somebody like
Yeah.
APJ Abdul Kalam. But for them, the role model is an Instagram influencer, because he has got million followers. He posts some random, reels, and he earns, say, XYG amount a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The young generation's very much oriented towards the social media, as you know, and a lot of them have an aspirational goal to be an influencer. And so it doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
But the failure rate there is probably similar. Maybe only
Still.
5% get through. So the challenge of and resilience challenge doesn't go away. Whatever role model you choose, why Murray and me too, we look up to excellence in leadership is that then if you set that as the tone at the top that you will set as a startup founder, your chances of success go up exponentially, because then your team will look up to you in terms of that you're walking the talk rather than just talking the talk
Yeah.
and behaving some other way. And so, yeah, that's
Yeah.
very valid.
And
Thank you so much.
Sanjay brings up a really key point, especially as organizations are transitioning with the use of AI. If the senior leadership, especially the chief executive officer, the president, the founder, is not willing to model the behavior, it's going to be a really bad sign, in terms of getting other people to transition. So I think that's a really key element, actually.
Now, would also want to understand from you is that, what models of public-private partnerships do you see as the most effective in creating a scalable, inclusive, and innovation-led education system?
So in India, there have been many experiments. Like there's the Skill India mission, which is there. You have industry relevant skills also being articulated. There's reskilling, upskilling, etc. There's the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, uh, in high demand sectors, free short term courses. You have Jan Shakti Sansthan for people who are not literate, and so on and so forth. Then there's Skill India, and there's of course private initiatives of all kinds, whether it's Azim Premji Foundation and so on and so forth. The fact is that there was a there's a famous saying from ancient India that knowledge cannot be given; it has to be taken. Now, you can make any amount of facilities available and so on and so forth, but if the internal drive isn't there to actually grab hold of it, internalize it, and then practice it, it'll not work. We'll still have the bell curve, where you'll have some excellence, you'll have failures, and then in the middle is the bit in the middle, but so of average and mediocrity. I think one society that I look up to, which is held its self up to a very high standard of behavior, is Japan. Now, let's not get into some of the negative behaviors which are famous there. Let's get into what is basics, like their civic sense, their focus on quality. They took on something like deeming, brought into their system, and they made it their culture, and they've actually now taught it to the world, and so on and so forth. So if you aspire to excellence, you become a society that will clean up football stadiums after you watched a match. What a thing to do for as an advertisement for your country and your society. So excellence is never like an option. You can't be. So that this is why, Murray's course that he runs is so interesting, which is the great founder paradigm. Because if you plug into that, you're aspiring to already emulate someone who's setting standards of excellence, which you're going to need. It's not like it's a nice thing to do. It will become the only differentiator you will have as a startup founder or even at work. How do you stand out at the workplace if you're really excellent at what you do? I don't know if that.
Yes.
The mental model here tends to be less government influence in the universities and the private sector, so on and so forth. So it seems there's more of a hands off from a governmental standpoint in terms of putting together these things. Some universities and institutions work very closely with employers. And to me, I think this is a very helpful business model. For example, prior to AI, I ran across an organization that was teaching students how to code, and it had direct relationships with all the major employers like a Microsoft, a Google, so on and so forth. And so the students had a path in to these very large organizations because the employer had or the university had relationships with the employer and knew what the employer wanted actually in terms of their graduates. And I thought that was a very smart model and very beneficial to both. But I don't see a lot of that going on actually. In most here.
So in India, strange but true, it was a non-governmental outfit called NIIT and Aptech Computer. So at the advent of computing, actually around 1998, 1999, these guys were rocking and rolling, and none of the universities, including the technical universities here, like the equivalent of the MIT, which is the IITs, etc., could match them. And Indians, by and large, oriented towards learning and especially technology. Oh man, they were churning them out like in the thousands. Of course, a lot of the so-called IT prowess of India got built during that time, the advent of computers. Then the next step was something that I was part of, which is actually, Rishikesh, you probably don't know this, but I was part of the Internet Revolution of India. So I was the president of the Internet Service Providers Association. Plus, I was wearing two CEO hats, CEO of SpectraNet and CEO of Nixie, which is a government the .in registry. And we were at 20 million broadband users at that time. And we said, why can't we at least be more than South Korea, which was 100 million? He said, we should at least be more than 200 million. The population was 900 million in India. And of course, I left the industry shortly after. This is 2005. But today we're at a 920 million and broadband equivalent subscribers. And we have the India stack and so many other things. So what India gives is scale, massive scale.
Yes.
The only mistake that the leadership does in India is to think small. And by this, I even mean leadership of people who are coming in from overseas. Recently, there was an international accelerator that wanted to come in and was tying up with us. And I told them, listen, you've got to behave in India like General Cortez, age 19, who said, burn the boats, just move forward. The way is there, because this is a will not forgive you if you don't have the guts and gumption to actually just go for it. So let's see what happens.
That's very insightful, sir. That's very inspiring and very insightful. To both of you, like if you have to imagine the future 10 years from now, what would be an ideal learning ecosystem look like?
You want to tackle that one first or should I?
You go first, Murray. Please go ahead.
Well, I think we're in a new world. I call it a paradigm shift, actually. And when a paradigm shifts, the established players may not adapt and they may actually decline. So this is a big issue, I think, in education. And the paradigm shift, in my view, is going towards the use of AI in all sorts of aspects of our lives. And again, we're primarily looking at business for the moment. And so I spend a lot of time, with AIs, and I find them to be quite interesting and quite fascinating, actually. They're evolving very, very, very quickly. And it perplexes me that humans aren't evolving as fast, or we're not evolving at all, actually. Or some of you might say we're regressing back.
Yes, exactly.
So this is a problem, right? Because our machines are becoming more capable, and we will argue whether they're doubling every 8 months or 12 months or 15, whatever it happens to be. But we're saying, as humans, we're staying kind of static, That's not all humans, by the way, but a fair amount of them. And so I think that the edge of education is going to be the use of human and artificial intelligence to be able to not just share expertise, but also to be able to develop skill. I see that AIs could be actually very good coaches. And I think we're starting to see that occur now, actually, in terms of different types of communication skills, so on and so forth. So a student can practice, maybe get the theory from the class, if you're using a class model. And then they have the so-called tutor being an AI, where they'd actually practice with the AI the theory that they had learned in the class. To me, I see that as a very likely possibility. And of course, Sanjay and I should realize that maybe we're obsolete and maybe we have no role in 5 years or 3 years. Maybe we're going to be on the employment lines like everyone else, so to speak, in academia. Because the
No,
students
Murray,
are going to
we'll have
sit there and say, well, why do I want to talk to a boring professor when I can talk to a really interesting AI? I mean, come on. So on and so forth. So I
Hey,
see
Murray, no
that.
chance of that. I'll tell you why. We'll have
Yeah,
our own digital avatars, right? That'll so that our digital avatar will talk to 100 million people. We won't have the
yeah.
burden of actually having to do that physically ourselves. But I kind of mean that seriously. Although people have they're seriously fed up of online stuff. But this is the greatest tool for education. So coming to your question, Rishikesh, the next 4-5 years, digital learning, self-paced learning, customized to suit the person, the learner, rather than suiting the content delivery platform or person or whatever, and in a very, very massive way. Now, if you look at my LinkedIn profile, you'll notice I've put up that, it's collaborating to co-create 100 million startup founders. Now, everyone laughed at me when they saw that. But I discovered 3 or 4 months after I put that up that Thunderbird University in the US, they have a Najafi Foundation that has put up online courses. And guess what their number is? 100 million. They are going after that also. Educating. Their first course was the basics of entrepreneurship. So it's incredibly heartening because even today, if we observe behavior, even in rural situations in India, look at farming, etc. Farmers are using the mobile phone for looking at the weather, what is the pricing that affect the crops that they're going to grow, etc., etc. And if you even look in tier 2, tier 3 towns where things are not that advanced, women are using the mobile phone, YouTube videos to learn maybe a new recipe for cooking, etc., etc. This is actually showing us the behavior is actually if you like, the smoke telling us where the fire is. So the fire, it's clearly digital. It's clearly massive. Who is going to succeed in terms of content? You've got to be like a Duolingo. So if anyone who's used Duolingo and the amount of gamification prowess that they have, the more you gamify what you do, whether in the physical classroom, as I do, and I get, I don't want to boast, but I get top ratings from the students because of my class, because of its usefulness, because it's a lot of fun as well. So gamification, making it fun, allowing people to learn whatever the hell they want to learn. Now, so this is a huge problem also for red brick building institutions with very high running costs. I think it's going to be really difficult. And US, I don't know what's going to happen in the US because US is making it difficult for people from India to come and study there. So their revenues are going to crash like hell. So they'll have to, I don't know what's going to happen, but India is going to benefit because a lot of the foreign universities are now setting up in India, and it's going to be phenomenal. So it makes sense, to do that. So the future is very bright because, and you guys are going to lead it. What we can do at Max is give you blessings and give you some input of our life experience.
Yeah. Well, clearly people are going to have to upskill and reskill, and there's going to have to be a lot of emphasis and a lot of time and rupiah and dollars put into it. And so education is going to be a really, really important element. And I hope that everyone who's listening understand that we just can't be complacent. We can't rely on the skills that worked last century. We have to think very differently about the 21st century. Things are shifting all around us, and that's where the opportunity is. I mean, if we think about it, right, it's in the change. So the entrepreneur might sense that a change is a new niche is developing, and the existing competitors may not go that way or ignore it, so on and so forth. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here, but only if we keep learning. And so I won't say how old Sanjay is, and I won't say how old I am, but when I was younger, I did not anticipate spending a fair amount of my day learning new things, to be really honest. I thought I would like be retired, and maybe working in a garden somewhere, making flowers grow and so on. Instead, I'm sitting on a screen learning AI.
I just did 2 certificates. The answer to that question, Murray, is that all three of us are 13.8 billion years old. We are made of the same stuff.
Oh, you're adding in your past lives. I got
I'm
it.
talking
Now I
about the
understand.
universe. That's how old we are. So anyway,
That
okay,
was very deep, sir. That was very deep. You basically touched upon the oneness of everybody.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, there's always something you can learn from somebody else, and this is a very important quality for anyone who wants to become an entrepreneur. Why entrepreneur? Even to navigate life, be prepared to learn permanently.
Yeah. And I've often thought great entrepreneurs have an ability we underappreciate as professors, which is they figure it out. They just figure it out. They don't know how to do it, but they figure it out. And I think all of us in this room emphasize with that. The success we've had is because we were able to figure it out, right?
Absolutely. That is so true, sir. When I started Dawdle, I think 2.5 years back, it was a
Yeah,
completely different business model than what it is right now.
right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And only you know the chasms you had to go through
Yes.
to emerge the other side and keep going. The
Yes.
important thing is to keep going.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that Professor Sanjay and Professor Murray joined us to share their insights with our global audience. Dawdle.live is now 125,000 plus CXOs from across the globe who listen to our podcast, who listen to the conversations. Extremely grateful, extremely happy that you took out time out of your busy schedule. We will be in touch, sir, and we look forward to hosting you again and again to inspire so many young entrepreneurs and even the executives. No, thank you so
Yep.
much, sir.
Thank you.
Pleasure, and look forward to catching up again. And Murray, thank you so much for joining this. I know how early
Thank
in the
you.
morning it is. Murray is from the Air Force, US Air Force, so he's kind of used to early mornings, but we don't want to push him too hard on that.
Now I'm going to go back to sleep, actually. Thank you for the opportunity, everyone. I really appreciate having a chance to talk to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you
Pleasure.
so much, sir.
Take care. All the best.